50,000 years ago, Australia was home to things that make the modern version, already the most venomous country on Earth, look like it had been significantly calmed down. Tonight, we're going back to before the calming. Think about what it means to call a place dangerous. Not dangerous the way a city neighborhood gets called dangerous, or the way a hiking trail carries a warning sign. Actually dangerous, where the ground itself, the water, the trees overhead, and the animals moving through all of them represent a genuine, statistically meaningful chance of death. Australia holds that title today, and has held it long enough that it has become a kind of cultural identity. The numbers are not exaggerated for effect. 20 of the 25 most lethal snakes on Earth live here, including every single one in the top 11. The country has more venomous species capable of killing a human than almost anywhere else on the planet. The inland taipan, the eastern brown, the blue-ringed octopus, the box jellyfish, the funnel web spider. None of these animals are rare. None of them are confined to remote wilderness. Some of the world's most venomous snakes are found in suburban backyards in Queensland. A saltwater crocodile can appear in a cattle trough. This is the baseline. This is what Australia looks like after whatever happened here was finished happening. And something did happen. About 50,000 years ago, this continent was running a version of itself that makes the modern one look managed and mild. But here is the part that doesn't get said often enough. Modern Australia, the one with the taipans and the funnel webs and the saltwater crocodiles, is not the original version. It is what was left after something much worse ran its course. The animals Australians warn tourists about today, the ones that fill the listicles and the wildlife documentaries, are survivors of a much older and much more extreme ecosystem. They didn't define prehistoric Australia. They outlasted it. The creatures that actually defined prehistoric Australia are gone. Every single one of them. And not because the continent became gentler, but because something shifted around 46,000 years ago, and the megafauna that had dominated this land for millions of years began disappearing one by one, until what remained was a stripped-down version of what had come before. What remained is what we now call dangerous. But the standard being applied to dangerous in 2024 is a standard that was set after the worst of it was already over. The box jellyfish, the inland taipan, the great white shark, these are the animals that made it through the filter. The ones that didn't make it through were larger, heavier, and by almost every measure, worse. So here's what that actually means. Every deadly animal Australia is famous for today, the snakes, the crocs, the spiders, was already present back then. Running alongside them, the box jellyfish still drifted in coastal waters. The great white still patrolled the coast. The saltwater crocodile still waited at riverbanks. None of them left. They're still here. But the creatures that did vanish, the ones we'll spend this entire documentary walking through, were so far beyond what survived that their extinction actually made the continent livable. That's the real measure of how bad prehistoric Australia was. Not that it was dangerous, that it was dangerous enough to make modern Australia look like a reasonable place to raise children. The animals we consider terrifying today are the ones that made it through a filter. They survived an era that killed off things far larger, far more powerful, and far more lethal than themselves. Therefore, everything you're about to hear isn't the story of what died out. It's the story of what was so extreme that even Australia couldn't keep it going. Start with the most basic assumption you have about crocodiles. The one thing everyone knows. that the water is where they kill you, and that dry land is where you're safe from them. Hold on to that assumption, because one of the first animals early Australians encountered was a crocodile that had specifically evolved to make it wrong. It didn't wait at riverbanks. It didn't need water at all, and the teeth in its jaw weren't built for drowning. They were built for something considerably faster and considerably worse. Before we get to what Megalania or the marsupial lion could do, we need to talk about what was already waiting on open ground before any of them entered the picture. A crocodile that ran, and one that you could not outrun into the water. Every person on Earth already knows, on some level, what a crocodile is. The image is fixed. It waits in water, almost completely still, almost invisible. And then it moves faster than it has any right to, closing the distance before the brain can process the danger. That is the crocodile. Water is its weapon. Distance is its weapon. The moment it comes onto land, it slows down, it waddles, and the threat mostly dissolves. Quincana was built on a completely different premise. Paleontologists who studied its remains found leg bones that were unusually long for any crocodilian, proportioned not for belly dragging across mud, but for upright, weight-bearing movement across dry terrain. Its tail was flat, not laterally compressed the way a swimming tail needs to be, which told researchers this animal wasn't designed for water at all. Its toes had a structure closer to something built for traction on hard ground. Most adults grew to around 3 meters and weighed approximately 200 kilograms. Roughly the same as a medium American alligator, but the largest known specimen reached 6 meters, placing it among the biggest predators on the continent during the Pleistocene. It shared that era with the first humans to arrive in Australia, which means that within living memory of those first generations, people were encountering this animal in the open scrubland where they hunted and traveled. But the legs are only half the problem. What made Quincana genuinely different from every crocodilian alive today, and from most that have ever existed, wasn't just that it could pursue prey across open ground. It was what it did when it caught them. Modern crocodiles have conical teeth. They grip. They hold. The killing method is drowning. Drag the animal underwater. Death roll. Wait. That method requires water, and it requires time. Quincana had ziphodont teeth, blade-like, compressed, heavily serrated along both edges, the same dental structure found in theropod dinosaurs, animals that evolved teeth specifically for cutting through large amounts of flesh quickly. Quincana didn't need to drown anything. Every bite removed material. A single strike from Quincana took a chunk, not a grip, which meant prey was already compromised from the first contact, bleeding and slowing, while the Quincana stayed on its feet and continued the pursuit. But here's the detail that closes off the last remaining option. If you somehow reached water, if you made it to a river or a creek, and threw yourself in thinking the crocodile behind you would stop at the bank, paleontologists believe Quincana was also an accomplished swimmer. The water wasn't a refuge. It was just a different surface to be hunted on. Here's the thing about Quincana that makes it genuinely worse than a modern crocodile. A saltwater crocodile is terrifying because you don't see it coming. It strikes from water, grabs you, and drowns you before you register what happened. Quincana removed that limitation entirely. It didn't need water. It didn't need concealment along a riverbank. It could simply follow you. Those long legs, that upright posture, those hoof-like toes, they weren't random mutations. They were a predator that had specifically evolved to hunt in open terrain, at speed, across the same dry Australian scrubland that early humans walked through every day. And because it had zipperdont teeth, blade-like, serrated, the same dental design that made theropod dinosaurs so effective, it didn't need to hold prey down and wait. Every bite removed material. Every bite was damage you couldn't recover from. Therefore, Quincana wasn't the crocodile that ambushed you at the water. It was the crocodile that found you away from the water, on ground you thought was safe. And it was faster than you expected something that large to be. So, Quincana was a crocodile that could chase you across dry land and follow you into the water. That's where prehistoric Australia started, not where it peaked. Because sharing that same landscape, moving through the same scrubland and open plains, was something larger. Something that didn't need to sprint to be dangerous, because what it carried in its mouth made speed irrelevant. There is a lizard alive today that kills by biting prey once and then simply following it until the wound does the rest of the work, sometimes for hours, sometimes across kilometers. That lizard is the Komodo dragon. What was in prehistoric Australia was the same animal from the same lineage, built on a scale that made the Komodo dragon look like a starting point. The question isn't whether it was venomous. The question is what that venom actually meant for anything it ever bit. Monitor lizards exist on a spectrum that already pushes against what most people think a lizard should be. At one end, small, fast, unremarkable. At the other end, the Komodo dragon, up to 3 meters long, venomous, capable of killing a water buffalo, and patient enough to follow a wounded animal for days. The Komodo dragon is the largest living lizard on Earth, and it is genuinely dangerous to humans. There are documented fatal attacks. Megalania, formerly Varanus priscus, was a monitor lizard in the same lineage as the Komodo dragon, and it was not 3 meters long. Conservative fossil estimates give it a minimum length of 3.5 meters and a minimum weight of around 158 kilograms, which already clears the Komodo dragon comfortably. Larger estimates, built from scaled-up fragmented remains, suggest lengths approaching 7 to 8 meters and weights that some studies place as high as 2 tons. The most commonly accepted working figure for a large adult lands somewhere around 575 kilograms, roughly the weight of a mature male grizzly bear, but longer, lower to the ground, and built on the same body plan that makes monitor lizards such effective hunters. Megalania moved across prehistoric Australia during the same period that humans first arrived on the continent, which means the two species occupied the same land at the same time. But the size, as extraordinary as it was, is not actually the most dangerous thing about Megalania. Size you can see coming. Size gives you distance to work with, time to register the threat and change direction. What Megalania likely carried inside its mouth is the detail that removes every option that size alone might leave open. All monitor lizards alive today are venomous. The venom is an anticoagulant. It prevents blood from clotting, keeps wounds open, and over time causes the kind of blood loss that leads to shock. Komodo dragons exploit this right now, in the present, on islands in Indonesia. They bite large prey, deer, pigs, water buffalo, and then withdraw. They don't chase, they don't need to. The wound stays open, and the blood keeps going, and the Komodo follows at a patient walk, sometimes over hours and kilometers, until the prey simply stops. Megalania was in the same lineage as the Komodo dragon, its closest living relative, and paleontologists working on its fossil record have concluded that it almost certainly hunted the same way. But Megalania wasn't 3 meters long. At its most commonly accepted adult size, it weighed somewhere around 575 kilograms, potentially 8 times heavier than a Komodo dragon, with a longer reach, a stronger first strike, and venom in the same system. Getting bitten and getting away were not the same outcome. They were just different timelines leading to the same place. The venom is the part that changes everything. Without it, Megalania is a giant lizard. Dangerous, yes, but something you might conceivably escape if you were fast enough or lucky enough. With it, escape becomes meaningless. The wound stays open. The blood keeps flowing. Shock sets in slowly, hours after the attack, long after you think you've gotten away. Komodo dragons hunt this way right now. They bite, withdraw, and follow their prey at a patient walk, waiting for the blood loss to do what their jaws started. Megalania, by every reasonable paleontological estimate, did the same, except it was potentially 8 times heavier than a Komodo dragon, with a longer reach and greater striking force. Therefore, the most frightening thing about Megalania isn't its size, though the size was extraordinary. It's that it turned survival into a delayed sentence. Getting away from it was not the same as being safe. In prehistoric Australia, there was no clean escape. There was only the question of how long the consequence would take to arrive. A sprinting crocodile, a venomous lizard potentially the size of a car, hunting with patience rather than speed, following wounded prey across the Australian interior for as long as it needed to. That's the ground level. That's what you were walking on. But prehistoric Australia also had a 6-meter snake, a snake with a specific anatomical limitation that sounds, at first, like a relief. It couldn't swallow prey whole. Its jaws were too inflexible, too primitive, too rigid for the stretching that modern constrictors use to consume large animals in one go. That sounds like good news. It is not good news. The reason it isn't good news is the detail that comes next, what Wanambi did instead, and why the inability to swallow whole made the encounter with it categorically more disturbing than a python of the same size. The mastoid snakes are a family that no longer exists anywhere on Earth. They were an ancient lineage, primitive by the standards of modern snakes, with jaws that functioned differently, skulls that were less flexible, and a body plan that predates most of what we recognize in living constrictors today. Wanambi was one of the largest of them, and it lived in Australia during the Pleistocene alongside every other creature in this documentary. In length, Wanambi reached up to 6 meters, placing it in the same range as a large Burmese python, one of the biggest snakes alive today. It was not venomous. Its hunting method relied on constriction. Ambush a target near water, coil around it, and squeeze the circulatory system into failure until the animal lost consciousness and died. That part is familiar. It's how pythons and boas work today. But Wanambi's skull was different from a modern constrictor's in one significant way. The jaw was more rigid, less elastic, less capable of the extreme stretching that lets a python swallow prey many times wider than its own head. A 6-meter python can swallow a deer whole. Wanambi, at a comparable size, could not. And that difference in anatomy changed everything about what happened after the kill. But the inflexible jaw, which sounds like the one disadvantage Wanambi had compared to a modern python, is actually the detail that makes it more alarming, not less. A python is limited by its own anatomy. It can only swallow what fits through its own skull, which means very large prey is off the menu regardless of how effectively the constriction worked. Wanambi had no such ceiling on what it could kill. The limitation was only on what it could swallow whole, and Wanambi solved that problem by not swallowing whole at all. After constriction, Wanambi used its teeth and the sheer mechanical force of its body to tear portions from the carcass, feeding in sections, returning to what it couldn't take in one visit, consuming prey over time rather than in one event. That makes Wanambi a more flexible predator than a python of comparable size, not a lesser one. But the most unsettling part isn't the feeding method, it's the location. Wanambi was an ambush predator, and it hunted near water, which in the dry Australian interior during the Pleistocene meant that any animal that needed to drink, which was every animal alive on the continent, was walking toward Wanambi's preferred position every single day. There was no avoiding the water, and Wanambi knew that. It just waited. The inflexible jaw sounds like a weakness. It reads like a design flaw, a snake that evolved to constrict, but couldn't finish the job. But that framing gets it exactly backwards. A python that swallows prey whole is, in a strange way, limited by the size of its own head. Wanambi had no such limit. It could kill something and then feed on it over time, in pieces, returning to a carcass, tearing away what it needed, moving on. That makes it a more versatile predator, not a lesser one. And the ambush strategy near water sources meant that any animal needing to drink, which is every animal, including humans, was walking into Wanambi's preferred hunting ground every single day. Therefore, the primitive jaw didn't make Wanambi less dangerous. It made the aftermath of an encounter with it more brutal than almost anything else on this list. There are recorded deaths from constrictor snakes in indigenous Australian communities even in modern times, and those snakes are a fraction of Wanambi's size. 6 meters of prehistoric ambush predator waiting at the only water for miles. That was the reality of daily life in ancient Australia. Like and subscribe now. The second half is where it gets truly strange. 3 reptiles, a running crocodile, a venomous giant lizard, and a primitive snake that hunted at every water source on the continent. That was the reptilian welcome party for the first humans to arrive in Australia. But the reptiles weren't the only predators. The mammals fought back, or rather, one mammal did, in a way that no mammal anywhere else on Earth has managed before or since. It wasn't large by the standards of the other creatures on this list. It weighed somewhere between 100 and 160 kilograms. By that measure alone, it shouldn't have been the most dangerous land predator in prehistoric Australia. But pound for pound, and this is a number that has been measured, tested, and peer-reviewed, no mammal that has ever lived on this planet hit harder. Not a lion, not a bear, not anything. What this animal was related to is the part that makes it genuinely strange. Marsupials are not usually what comes to mind when the conversation turns to apex predators. They carry their young in pouches. The most famous ones, kangaroos, koalas, wombats, are herbivores. Even the Tasmanian devil, which is a carnivore, is small enough that most people wouldn't rank it alongside lions or wolves in terms of threat. The marsupial branch of the mammal family tree in the popular imagination is the gentle branch. Thylacoleo carnifex is the reason that assumption needs to be revised. Paleontologists who reconstructed its skull found something unexpected, a bite force relative to body size that exceeded every other mammal ever measured. A medium-sized Thylacoleo, which weighed somewhere between 100 and 160 kilograms, could generate the same bite force as a lion roughly 2.5 times its own mass. Its front limbs carried a single large retractable claw on each hand, attached to semi-opposable thumbs that gave it the grip to climb trees, which it did, and from which it almost certainly dropped onto prey below. The incisors at the front of its skull were large and piercing. The premolars were shaped like flat blades. It was the largest carnivorous marsupial ever to live in Australia, and its closest living relative, its actual genetic nearest neighbor, is the koala. But the bite force number, as striking as it is, doesn't fully capture what made Thylacoleo carnifex so effective. Raw force is only useful if the skull and teeth can direct it correctly, and Thylacoleo's dentition was built in a way that no other carnivore before or after has quite replicated. The large incisors at the front pierced deep into flesh, not to grip, but to anchor. The enormous blade-like premolars directly behind them then severed whatever was in reach: windpipe, spinal cord, major arteries, all simultaneously in a single closing of the jaw. Death for large prey came in under 60 seconds. An African lion, working with comparable prey, takes 15 minutes or more. But the claws change the picture entirely in a different direction. Each front paw carried one large retractable claw attached to a semi-opposable thumb, not a fixed claw like most carnivores, but one that could be manipulated, rotated, directed. Thylacoleo used these to climb trees, which paleontologists confirmed from cave deposits, showing Thylacoleo remains in elevated positions alongside cached prey. It dragged kills upward the way leopards do, storing food out of reach of other predators and returning to it. And it dropped from trees onto prey below, a predator that could be overhead as easily as it could be at ground level, in a landscape of ancient Australian bush where every tree was a potential hiding spot. Its closest living relative is the koala, the animal that sleeps in trees and eats leaves produced through millions of years of Australian pressure, the most efficient pound-for-pound killing machine in mammal history. The koala connection is the part that stays with you. Everything about Thylacoleo carnifex sounds like it belongs to the cat family. The retractable claws, the ambush hunting, the tree climbing, the way it dragged kills upward to catch them. But its DNA traces back to the same lineage as an animal that sleeps 20 hours a day and eats eucalyptus leaves. What that tells us is that Australia's evolutionary pressure was so extreme that it took a docile herbivore lineage and, over millions of years, produced the most efficient killing machine of any mammal by body weight ever recorded. A medium-sized Thylacoleo could kill a large animal in under 60 seconds. An African lion takes 15 minutes to do the same work. Therefore, Thylacoleo carnifex wasn't just a predator. It was what happens when an ecosystem is so brutal for so long that even the marsupial branch of the family tree is forced to produce something like this. An animal that kills faster than anything its size has any right to, built from a lineage that had no business building it. So far, everything on this list has been a predator. The crocodile that ran, the lizard that poisoned slowly, the snake that waited at the water, the marsupial that killed large animals in under 60 seconds. Every animal a hunter, something that would actively seek out prey and pursue it. Not everything in prehistoric Australia killed that way. Some of the most unsettling animals on this continent weren't predators at all. They were large, they were everywhere, and they didn't need to hunt anything to represent a serious physical threat to anything that came near them. One of them walked on two legs, stood at eye level with a grown human, weighed close to 240 kilograms, and nested on open ground. Its eggs were larger than a football. Early Australians found those nests. What they decided to do about them is a detail that changes the way you think about who those people actually were. The Dromornithids were a family of flightless birds that lived in Australia for millions of years before going extinct. Paleontologists call them thunderbirds, and the name fits. These were not small, delicate animals. They were built on a scale that placed them well above most living birds in terms of mass and physical presence, with bone structures thick enough to support bodies that would have looked genuinely prehistoric, even by the standards of the Pleistocene. Genyornis newtoni was among the last of them. It stood approximately 2 meters tall, eye level with a tall human, and weighed around 240 kilograms, close to 530 pounds. Its bones were dense and heavy, its legs were powerful, and its overall build suggested an animal that was difficult to knock down and fast enough to be dangerous if it chose to be. Genyornis was almost certainly an herbivore, browsing on the vegetation of ancient Australia rather than hunting. Its eggs were enormous, larger than a football, and the nests it built on the ground would have been visible from a significant distance. When the first humans arrived in Australia around 50,000 years ago, Genyornis was already there, walking through the same landscape as Quincana, Megalania, Thylacoleo, and Wanambi, adding its own particular scale to an environment that already had no shortage of large things moving through it. But the size alone isn't the complication. At 2 meters tall and 240 kilograms, Genyornis was large enough that most predators would have thought twice before approaching it, and most prey animals would have given it a wide path simply to avoid the possibility of being kicked. Genyornis was almost certainly an herbivore, but an herbivore of that mass, with those legs and that beak, doesn't need predatory intent to be dangerous. A cassowary, Genyornis's closest surviving relative, still alive in northern Australia and New Guinea today, is classified as the world's most dangerous bird and has killed humans with a single kick, delivered from legs built on exactly the same plan. Genyornis was heavier than a cassowary, built on denser bones, and living in a landscape that was already pushing every animal towards some form of defensive capability. But the real tension isn't about how dangerous Genyornis was to humans. It's about what humans decided to do anyway. The burned eggshells found at ancient campsites across Australia tell a story that goes in a completely different direction than what you'd expect. Because those shells weren't cracked by predators or broken by weather. They were cooked. Early Australians, newly arrived on a continent they had never seen before, found the ground-level nests of a 530-pound bird and decided the eggs inside were worth whatever came with taking them. The burned eggshells are what make this real. Paleontological evidence at multiple ancient Australian campsites shows Genyornis eggshells that were cracked and charred by fire, not broken by a predator, not decomposed over time, but deliberately cooked. Early humans found the nests of a bird weighing over 500 pounds and decided the eggs were worth taking. That is an extraordinary calculation. Genyornis had powerful legs, sharp talons, and a beak designed to deal with anything that came near its nest. And early Australians, newly arrived on a continent they didn't yet fully know, walked up to those nests anyway. The cassowary, Genyornis's surviving relative, is classified as the world's most dangerous bird today and has killed people with a single kick. Genyornis was bulkier, heavier, and paired with every other creature on this list in the same landscape. Therefore, the eggshells don't just tell us that humans hunted these birds. They tell us something specific about who those first Australians were. People willing to take that risk in that world before breakfast. Genuineness wasn't a predator, and early Australians raided its nests anyway. That's the measure of who these people were, and also the measure of how much food pressure they were operating under. In a landscape where finding something large enough to sustain a group meant getting close to animals that could seriously hurt you. The herbivores of prehistoric Australia require their own accounting, not because they hunted anything, but because size and unpredictability have always been their own category of danger, a category modern naturalists are very careful about. Even with the comparatively smaller animals alive today, what was alive 50,000 years ago in Australia was not comparatively smaller. There was a kangaroo that couldn't hop. There was a marsupial with a bear's forelimbs, bark-stripping claws, and a short trunk. Neither of them was interested in hunting you. Both of them could have ended you without particularly trying. A modern kangaroo is already a larger animal than most people picture before they see one in person. A big red kangaroo stands nearly 2 meters tall and can weigh 90 kilograms. It can move at speeds exceeding 50 kilometers an hour and deliver a kick capable of breaking bone. People who work with kangaroos treat them with respect. They are not small and they are not harmless. Procoptodon goliath was a kangaroo that stood 3 meters tall and weighed approximately 500 kilograms, half a metric ton. Its face was short and wide, unlike the long, narrow face of a modern kangaroo, giving it a broader skull and stronger chewing capacity for processing tough vegetation. Its arms were long enough to pull down high branches, and where a modern kangaroo hops, using its tail as a counterbalance across all 4 limbs at low speeds and bounding at pace. Procoptodon is thought to have moved upright on 2 legs most of the time, walking bipedally through the Australian interior in a way that would have looked almost deliberate. Alongside Procoptodon, another large herbivore called Palorchestes moved through the same terrain, a marsupial with a bear-sized frame, powerful forelimbs, bark-stripping claws, and a short trunk. Neither animal was a predator. Both were large enough that the distinction barely mattered. But the scale is only the beginning of what makes Procoptodon strange. Modern kangaroos hop. It is their defining characteristic, the locomotion that sets them apart from nearly every other large mammal on Earth. Using their tail as a counterbalance and their tendons as springs to cover ground efficiently at speed, Procoptodon, at 3 meters tall and 500 kilograms, couldn't hop. The body mass made it biomechanically impossible. Instead, paleontologists believe Procoptodon walked upright on 2 legs, moving through the Australian interior in a way that would have looked almost deliberately humanoid to anyone watching from a distance. But Procoptodon wasn't alone in its size category among the herbivores. Palorchestes moved through the same terrain, a marsupial that had a bear-sized frame, forelimbs built for pulling and stripping bark from trees, large claws adapted for digging and leverage, and a short trunk used for manipulating vegetation the way no purely Australian herbivore does today. Palorchestes wasn't a predator. Neither was Procoptodon. But large herbivores with unpredictable temperaments and the physical capacity to cause serious injury have always posed a risk to humans who move through the same space, and modern tapirs, far smaller than Palorchestes, attack people without warning often enough that wildlife workers treat them as a genuine hazard. The prehistoric versions of these animals were not gentle giants in any useful sense of the phrase. The timeline is the detail that matters most here. Procoptodon didn't vanish in some deep, prehistoric past that feels safely distant. Some evidence places isolated populations surviving until as recently as 18,000 years ago. That is not ancient history by any meaningful measure. That is a blink. Modern humans were building shelters, making tools, and painting on cave walls, while 3-meter kangaroos were still walking upright through the Australian interior. Alongside Procoptodon, Palorchestes, the marsupial tapir, moved through the same bush with bear-sized forelimbs and claws built for stripping bark from trees, capable of rearing to full height when threatened. Neither of these animals was a dedicated predator, but size and unpredictability are their own kind of danger, and modern tapirs attack humans without warning despite their reputation for passivity. Therefore, the herbivores of prehistoric Australia weren't a relief from the predators. They were a separate category of risk. Large, powerful animals that didn't need to hunt you to hurt you, sharing every water source, every forest path, and every open plain with the people trying to survive there. Procoptodon walked upright through the Australian interior, 3 meters tall, half a metric ton, still present when humans were painting cave walls and building shelters. Palorchestes moved through the same terrain on a body built like a bear, with claws designed to pull trees apart. Neither was a predator, and neither needed to be. But there was one herbivore in prehistoric Australia that reframes the entire ecosystem. Not because it was the most aggressive, not because its survival strategy involved anything other than eating plants slowly across an enormous landscape, but because of what it took for a wombat to survive here. Its closest living relative weighs 35 kilograms and fits comfortably in a person's arms. What that lineage produced in prehistoric Australia is not something that fits in your arms. It is something that weighed as much as an Asian elephant, and the reason it had to get that large tells you more about prehistoric Australia than almost anything else on this list. A wombat is a stocky, barrel-shaped marsupial that digs burrows, eats grass, and produces cubic feces, a fact that has made it famous mostly online. The largest wombats alive today weigh around 35 kilograms. They are solid animals, built low to the ground, with strong digging claws and a hard rump used to block burrow entrances against predators. They are not aggressive. They are not dangerous in any meaningful sense to an adult human. Diprotodon optatum was the largest marsupial that ever lived on Earth, and its closest living relative is that same wombat. Diprotodon weighed up to 3.85 metric tons, equivalent to a fully grown Asian elephant. It stood over 1.8 meters at the shoulder and stretched close to 3 meters in length. For context, that is heavier than a white rhinoceros. Diprotodon roamed Australia for over 1 million years, browsing across open plains and woodlands, processing enormous quantities of vegetation with teeth that were adapted for grinding tough plant material. Those teeth, at the back of the jaw, generated approximately 11,000 newtons of force, enough pressure applied to the right point to shatter a human femur. Diprotodon was not a predator. It had no reason to seek out a fight, but it was the size of an elephant, and it shared its landscape with every predator on this list. But the size is almost secondary to what it tells you about everything around it. Diprotodon didn't reach the weight of an Asian elephant by accident or genetic drift. It reached that weight because the ecosystem it lived in, the predators it shared the land with, the pressure it faced every day across 1 million years of Australian evolution, selected for mass as a survival strategy. Thylacoleo carnifex, the marsupial lion with the strongest pound-for-pound bite ever recorded, was a real predator in this landscape. Megalania, potentially weighing 575 kilograms with venom in its bite, was real. Quincana, a sprinting crocodile with slicing teeth, was real. Diprotodon's response to all of that was to become too large to kill easily, and it worked right up until it didn't. But the bite force is the detail that tends to land differently on reflection. 11,000 newtons of force at the back molars. Diprotodon generated that pressure chewing plants. The jaw structure that produced that number was built for grinding tough fibrous vegetation across a lifetime of browsing, not for defense or predation. The fact that the same jaw could, incidentally, shatter a human femur was not a design feature. It was a consequence, a byproduct of the mechanical demands of being an elephant-sized herbivore in prehistoric Australia, where even the problem of eating was large enough to require equipment that doubled as a weapon. Diprotodon is the creature that reframes the entire ecosystem. Everything else on this list is frightening because of what it could do to you directly. Bite force, venom, constriction, speed. Diprotodon is frightening for a different reason. It shows what the prey animals had to become just to survive alongside everything else. When the herbivores in your ecosystem weigh 4 tons and can break a human femur with the back teeth they use for chewing plants, you understand something about the baseline level of pressure every living thing in ancient Australia was operating under. Diprotodon didn't need to kill anything. Its survival strategy was mass, sheer, immovable, Asian elephant equivalent mass, and it worked well enough to keep the species alive for over 1 million years. Therefore, Diprotodon is the anchor of prehistoric Australia, not because it was the most dangerous, but because it was the most honest. It is a wombat. Its closest living relative fits in your arms, and it grew to the size of an elephant. That is what this continent did to animals. That is what surviving here required. Quincana on land, Megalamia on land, Wanambi at every water source, Thylacoleo in the trees, Genyornis on open ground, Procoptodon and Palorchestes moving through the same bush, Diprotodon browsing across plains, an elephant-sized wombat that had to become that large just to survive what was already out there. That is the land. None of it accounts for the water, not the rivers, and certainly not the ocean, because the seas surrounding prehistoric Australia were operating on a scale that makes the land fauna look contained. There were things in those waters that make the great white shark, an animal that kills people with enough regularity to have shaped entire coastal cultures around its presence, look like a reasonable hazard. What was in the ocean during the same period that Megalania was on land is a question worth sitting with for a moment before the answer arrives. The Australian landmass doesn't exist in isolation. It is surrounded by ocean on every side, and those oceans connect to the waters that once covered the ancient supercontinent Gondwana before Australia split away and drifted into its current position. The seas around Australia are, by modern standards, already home to some of the ocean's most capable predators: the great white shark, the saltwater crocodile in coastal estuaries, the box jellyfish. These are animals that kill people today with enough regularity that coastal communities maintain warnings and protocols around them. The prehistoric version of those waters was on a completely different scale. Kronosaurus, a marine reptile, not a fish or a shark, patrolled the seas around ancient Australia approximately 120 million years ago, reaching 11 meters in length, with a skull nearly 2 meters long, wider and heavier than anything a T-Rex carried on its neck. and teeth the size of bananas set into jaws capable of generating catastrophic crushing force. Its estimated body weight fell between 15 and 20 tons. Much later, in the Miocene epoch, Megalodon arrived, a shark that reached 18 meters in length, with teeth larger than a human hand and a bite force estimated at around 18,000 kilograms, roughly 30 times what a lion can produce. Hunting alongside it was Leviathan melvillei, a sperm whale with teeth the size of wine bottles, set in both the upper and lower jaw, using sonar organs powerful enough to stun prey with sound before closing in. But the land predators, as extreme as they were, at least operated in the open. You could see Megalania coming across flat terrain. You could hear Quincana moving through dry scrub. The ocean offers none of that. It conceals everything below the surface, removes the visual information that land prey can use to detect and avoid threats, and replaces it with nothing. Just open water and the knowledge that something could approach from any direction, at any depth, and at whatever speed it chose. Megalodon chose speeds up to 40 miles per hour, which is faster than most surface boats move in recreational use. It approached prey from below, using the depth of the ocean as concealment and striking upward at high speed, targeting fins first, deliberately crippling prey before the killing bite. A hunting strategy that goes far beyond instinct and into something that looks uncomfortably close to method. Its bite force of approximately 18,000 kilograms was around 30 times what a lion produces, strong enough to shatter the bones of the largest whales that existed during the Miocene. But Megalodon shared these waters with Leviathan melvillei, a sperm whale with wine bottle-sized teeth in both upper and lower jaws, which actively hunted other whales and used sonar organs powerful enough to stun prey with directed sound waves before closing in. Two apex predators, both operating in the same ocean, both feeding on the largest animals in the water, in seas that surrounded a continent already running Quincana and Megalania and Thylacoleo on land simultaneously. The scale of Megalodon is where the numbers stop feeling real. A bite force stronger than a T-Rex, teeth larger than a human hand. A hunting strategy that targeted fins first, deliberately crippling prey before finishing it, which requires a level of calculated predatory behavior that goes beyond simple aggression. Australian waters were among its primary hunting grounds, but Megalodon wasn't even the oldest terror in these seas. Kronosaurus patrolled the same waters 120 million years earlier, with a skull twice the size of a T-Rex and a body weight between 15 and 20 tons. Leviathan hunted alongside Megalodon in later periods, using sonar to stun whales before biting through them with wine bottle-sized teeth set in both jaws. Therefore, the land and the ocean around prehistoric Australia were operating on the same principle. Everything was larger, everything was more dangerous, and nothing at the top of the food chain left much room for error. The continent's reputation for danger didn't begin at the shoreline. It extended outward into waters that held some of the most formidable predators the planet has ever produced. Kronosaurus in the ancient seas, Megalodon in the Miocene Ocean, Leviathan hunting whales with sound. On land, a sprinting crocodile, a venomous lizard the size of a car, a 6-meter ambush snake, a marsupial that killed in under 60 seconds, giant birds, giant kangaroos, elephant-sized wombats. This was the continent. This was the full picture. And then, approximately 50,000 years ago, someone arrived. Small groups of people carrying spears and fire with no prior knowledge of what was waiting for them, because no human being had ever set foot on this continent before. No map, no warning, no record of what Australia contained, because there was no record to pass on. They came anyway, walked into all of it, and what happened next is the part of this story that the fossil record did not predict. Approximately 50,000 years ago, the first humans reached Australia. The exact route they took is still debated, but the timing is not. The genetic and archaeological evidence places the first Australians on this continent at roughly the same period that Quincana, Megalania, Thylacoleo, Wanambi, Genyornis, Procoptodon, and Diprotodon were all alive and present across the landscape. These were not creatures from some safely distant past. They were the animals that greeted the first people who ever set foot here. Those first Australians came with spears, fire, and the knowledge they had accumulated during a long migration across terrain that was already difficult. They had no metal. They had no horses. They had no written record of what they were walking into, no maps, no prior knowledge of what Australia contained, because no human had ever been here before. What they found was a continent where the land predators included a sprinting crocodile, a venomous lizard potentially the size of a car, a 6-meter constricting snake that tore its prey apart rather than swallowing it whole, and a marsupial with the strongest pound-for-pound bite ever recorded in any mammal. The herbivores weighed as much as elephants. The birds stood eye to eye with a grown adult. The ocean held megalodon. But the genetic and fossil record doesn't show humans hiding from this world. It doesn't show careful avoidance, slow habituation from a safe distance, or a gradual expansion into territories only after the megafauna had retreated. What the record shows is direct contact, immediate and repeated, from the earliest period of human presence on the continent. Burned Genyornis eggshells appear in campsites dated to within a few thousand years of first arrival. Cut marks on Diprotodon bones, the specific kind of marks left by stone tools during butchering, appear at sites across the continent. These are not the marks of scavengers picking over something that died of other causes. They are the marks of hunters processing a kill. But the numbers don't make it less strange. The first Australians had stone-tipped spears and fire. Thylacoleo carnifex had the strongest pound-for-pound bite of any mammal ever measured and could kill a large animal in under 60 seconds. Megalania potentially weighed 575 kilograms with anticoagulant venom in its bite. Quincana was a 6-meter crocodile that could sprint across open ground and follow prey into water. And the first Australians, small groups of people moving into terrain they had never mapped, carrying technology they had developed for an entirely different continent, decided to hunt the prey animals that lived alongside all of those predators. Within roughly 4,000 years of human arrival, the megafauna started disappearing. Not slowly, fast in geological terms. One after another, the animals that had dominated Australia for millions of years went extinct, and the creature that arrived last, with no natural armor and no venom, was still standing when all of them were gone. The archaeological record doesn't suggest that early Australians survived prehistoric Australia by avoiding it. The burned eggshells prove they raided Genyornis nests. Cut marks on Diprotodon bones prove they butchered elephant-sized wombats. The megafauna didn't disappear from climate change alone. Human hunting pressure is now considered a significant factor in the extinction of nearly every large species on this list. These were people with no metal tools, no domesticated animals, no ranged weapons beyond thrown spears, and they arrived on a continent running Quincana, Megalamia, Thylacoleo, and Wanambi simultaneously. And they won, not by accident, not by avoidance, by hunting the hunters, eating the giants, and outlasting every creature that had ruled this land for millions of years before the first human foot touched Australian soil. Therefore, the real story of prehistoric Australia isn't about the monsters. It's about the fact that the most dangerous thing to ever live on this continent showed up last, looked around at all of it, and stayed. If this kept you company tonight, a like before you drift off takes about 2 seconds. Subscribe if you want more nights like this one, and we'll see you in the next one. That's Prehistoric Australia, tamed by time, not by choice. Subscribe, and we'll go somewhere else that wasn't.